Welcome back to Work on a Super Yacht. And when you think about fish on a super yacht, you probably think about those nice big fish tanks, maybe in the main salon, for the owner or the guests. But in this video, I'm not going to be talking about guest fish. I'm going to be talking about crew fish. And so to tell you this story, we need to go all the way to Fort Lauderdale, where we were alongside preparing for the Caribbean season. And one weekend, the chef stepped off the boat, and when he came back, he had a fish tank, probably about twice the size of the one you see behind me. But unlike that one you see behind me, it wasn't for tropical freshwater fish. No, it was for marine fish. A lot harder to keep, that's salt water. So, plan was he was going to put it in the galley on the countertop. What could possibly go wrong? Well, quite a few things, actually, I thought. But nevertheless, he got started and he set it up, and there were corals and shrimp and some fish, some clownfish, those little Nemo fellas. And it looked great. I used to work as a dive master, so for a while, the reef was my home, so I love that sort of stuff. But as I say, quite a lot of work to keep a marine fish tank. So of an evening, we'd often find him in there, testing the water, changing the water, fiddling around with the temperature settings and the lighting, that sort of thing. But he wasn't alone. He had some help, because the captain at the time was also really interested in this hobby. So they were basically looking after it together. After a week or two, it was time to kick off the Caribbean season. So we set sail for British Virgin Islands, the BVIs. And I'll never forget that trip, because we got absolutely hammered. And I don't mean drunk. No, the weather was bad. It was really bad. And they'd put this cling film, or I think some of you might call it glad wrap, over the top of the fish tank to keep the water from sloshing out. But as we all know, water, it's always going to take the path of least resistance, and so water was sloshing out all over the countertop. Nothing too major, but certainly not ideal. I'm still not actually sure whether or not fish can get seasick, but if fish can get seasick, then these fish most certainly were. Anyway, carried on into the season, and it wasn't too long before the owner discovered that there were some fish on board. But he was not unhappy about this. In fact, far from it. He liked the fish, and periodically he would turn up in the crew mess on his way to the galley with his kids to look at the fish. And I just remember the crew would be down in the crew mess. Maybe they're having something to eat, maybe they're on a break, just taking a little time out, and all of a sudden the owner's standing there and everyone's sort of standing to attention like that. You know, it's always a bit disconcerting when guests arrive in crew areas, especially the crew mess, unexpectedly. In fact, it can cause some problems, because of course that's like one of the few places that the crew have to go to get some space from the owners and the guests, and from being on show. So when guests cross that boundary, it can ruffle a few feathers. Anyway, in this instance, they were on their way to the fish tank, and I guess we were all happy that they liked the fish tank and they found that interesting, and that was something for them to do. I guess we just have to be thankful that this owner didn't decide that he wanted a fish tank of his own. A few more weeks pass, and then it's time for the chef to go on leave. He was on rotation, as was the captain, who was also going on leave at the same time. So that left the question, who's going to look after the fish? Because of course you can't just pack up your fish tank into your suitcase and take it home with you. So the other captain, he wasn't interested in looking after the fish. So the job fell to the incoming chef. I can just imagine how the handover went. He'd just sort of be like, well, here's the provisions, and we got got plenty of that, but we need to get some of that in. And here's the preference sheets and some of the menus that we've been running with. And over here is my fish tank. If you wouldn't mind just looking after that while I'm gone. And as you do when you're coming in and taking over, you just kind of, yeah, sure, because what else to do? You got a lot going on in your head. You've just arrived on board. It's all being handed over, and you just sort of roll with it. But I remember a few weeks later that he was less impressed about the fact that he'd been left with these fish to look after. He was absolutely doing his best, no doubt. But like I say, a lot of work just to keep them alive. And he was terrified that he was going to kill them. But at the same time, he's trying to concentrate on his job. A chef in full charter mode has usually got quite a lot going on as it is. We got to the end of the season, and I don't recall how much of the livestock that started out in that tank at the start of the season made it to the end of the season. I do remember that the chef was a little nervous when the other chef, the fish owner, returned, handing it back over, and of course wanting the chef to be happy that he'd done enough to look after these fish. I don't think that fish tank made it to the next season in the Mediterranean, although I don't quite recall, and I left soon after that. But that was the story of crew fish, which is not something I'd ever seen before, and it's not something I've ever seen since. Maybe you tell me if you've had crew fish on your yacht. It's just another little story from the archives of my brain. At the time, a lot of these things I never really thought too much about, because you just have to keep calm and carry on, because you can't stop to think too much about how it's a bit of an odd situation. But now I look back, I think actually that was a bit out of the ordinary. So if you like these little anecdotes, please do let me down in the comments. I can share plenty more with you. If I can just leave you with a moral to this story, I think there are many things that you should take with you when you go to work on a yacht. Certainly, if you're out on deck, a leatherman. But your fish, now I would recommend leaving the fish tank at home. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.